It is the Vegas Take Sharp and Shapiro, an enormous guest we're working on, and it's about, again, it's like 50-50 right now, but an enormous guest we're hoping to get at the top of the hour. So stay tuned for that. I can't say who it is right now, but hopefully if everything works out, this person will be joining us coming up at the top of the hour. When I say enormous, trust me, I mean enormous. But the guy we have with us on the line right now, his name is John Johnson. He's an economist and CEO of Edgeworth Analytics. Smarter man than I, that's for sure, when it comes to all this stuff, unemployment, the economy. And, John, we appreciate you taking some time to join us. How are you?
Hey, what's up, John?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you guys?
Oh, we're hanging in
Doing
there,
well.
just like everybody else, dealing with this difficult situation. So a lot of important topics I want to discuss with you, John, starting with unemployment. My understanding is, God, millions and millions of Americans have been filing from unemployment, certainly more than anyone since I've been alive. What do you make of those numbers? And for people that are still waiting to get paid, what advice would you give to them?
Well, the numbers are staggering. I mean, they've gotten so large that it's a little hard to put into perspective. So as of today, there are over 16 million claims for unemployment insurance in 3 weeks.
Wow.
To give you some sense of the magnitude, think of it this way. If the average temperature in the United States was 43 degrees, this would be the equivalent of the number jumping to 188.7 degrees Fahrenheit. So just in terms of the pure magnitude of this, it is unprecedented. The two biggest prior recessions, the 1982 recession and the 2008-2009 recession, the largest month was only about 2.6 million people. So 16 million in 3 weeks versus 2.6 million. Pretty much any way you look at this, this is really, truly unprecedented.
And how big was the workforce before this started?
Right. So roughly the unemployment rate right now, you're going to be at about 13 to 14% with the 16 million people unemployed. So, it's well over 150 or so million, but, it varies by sector and things like that. So.
Gotcha. So now, the big question, right? The billion-dollar question would be, for lack of a better term, when is the economy going to reopen? Some people are saying it needs to open now. Other people are saying, look, let the virus dictate that. When do you think the economy needs to open? When do you see it opening, and how do you think this country will recover from it?
Well, the problem, and really this is a lot more akin to a natural disaster than it is to sort of a typical recession, right? Because this is pretty much, comes, no matter how much it could have been anticipated, as a practical matter, this is a gigantic, just one-time shock to the system.
Right.
So right now, we sort of have this trade-off where you have a public health crisis, and the real trade-offs that everybody is grappling with, that sort of government, companies, society, is, well, what would the world look like if we just reopened? Well, the problem with that is you probably have a much higher mortality rate from the disease, but we still don't really have it figured out. You could have a much more taxed medical system, and you could have to go into lockdown again and create a much deeper disrupted economy. One other issue that people have to also realize is now not only consumer confidence, but just fear starts to take hold. So let's say we reopen the economy tomorrow. How many people would actually go back out and start traveling and jump on an airplane right away? So until we get a handle on the public health crisis, it is still going to be difficult to sort of, even if you wanted to reopen the economy, to really do it until we can give people confidence that it's under control. And unfortunately, what that means is we're going to incur short-run economic losses with the hope that we're going to mitigate a much longer, deeper recession on the back end.
So what industry, in your opinion, over the next 2 years will be affected the worst by this?
I think right now what it looks like is travel and tourism, unfortunately, because that just seems to be the place where, first of all, when you go into a recession anyway, that's usually the sectors that are hit the hardest. And now you have this other barrier that, well, if people are afraid to travel, if they're afraid to get on planes, that could really have a pretty deep hit. It's not clear whether the restaurant industry, how quickly it will rebound. I think the key to most of this is going to be the longer this goes, if businesses can hang on, then the recovery can be quicker. But if businesses start to shutter or shut down completely, then even if you reopen the economy, there's going to be a certain amount of built-in time to have to rebuild and what's going to happen from there.
So as of now, there's been, I think, the $2.2 million stimulus bill, the $2.3 million that was just put into the economy last night. If, let's say, this thing lasts 90 days and there is a need for 2 more stimulus bills, what happens to the Federal Reserve and what happens to the value of the U.S. dollar?
Well, the Federal Reserve right now position has mainly been about sort of trying to sort of backstop in terms of loans, not just sort of the only stimulus bills. I mean, it is a worldwide crisis, so I think there's at least some sense the dollar could remain stable, and depending on how badly it continues to hit here or if other sectors start to take off. But I will say with respect to the stimulus, probably the biggest problem is if you think about a $1,200 check that most, of these families could be getting,
Right.
$1,200, even for the lowest income bracket, somebody who makes $15,000 a year, that's not even 1 month's paycheck. So two-earner families that make $100,000 a year that might get $2,400, that's not even 1/10 of 1 month's paycheck. So this is a relatively small amount of money, although it's big in the aggregate. For any given family, it's really not very big at all, and that's going to be part of the problem as well.
So there's been an estimation that the Las Vegas unemployment rate could hit as high as 25%. Have you ever heard of a city having that high of an unemployment rate? And if that takes place, and let's say the economy comes back in 30, or that we open things back up in 30 days, you're going to have your MGMs, your Venetians, your Wynns, your major outfits are going to do very well. And this was actually mentioned during the press conference yesterday. A woman asked President Trump about the smaller casinos and the smaller businesses in Las Vegas that aren't being, on the gaming side of things, that aren't being considered, or that aren't getting any funding from the CARES Act. What happens to those type of businesses outside of the big players in Las Vegas?
All right. So first, the 25% would be, other than some kind of isolated event, like, a hurricane that hits a city in a very, very short run, 25% is definitely unprecedented. You're talking sort of like Great Depression type numbers. So, again, we're already potentially at 13 to 14% nationwide. So it is very likely there's going to be rates that high, including in Las Vegas. Now, it sort of ties to what I was just saying before, that the problem is that, for the companies that can weather the storm, that's fine, and they can sort of rebound on the back end. But for the companies that can't,
Right,
which really are supposed to be the ones that are trying to be the target of some of the stimulus, the small business stimulus, things like that, if they can't weather the storm, at some point they become liquidity constrained. That's where really the problem is, because they can't just bounce back. They don't just sort of, when we reopen the economy, they don't have the ability to do that. And so that's where the more structural problems start to come into play with the economic circumstances, and why, if this goes too long, the longer it goes, the more need there is to mitigate, particularly targeting those companies and those industries or parts of the industries where they just won't have the resources, the capital to hold out long enough to get back in business and take advantage of the huge spike in demand that hopefully will come on the back end of all this.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking with John Johnson. He's an economist and CEO of Edgeworth Analytics. I wanted to ask you, as you know, John, look, I want you to speak, from a human to a human. There's a lot of people in this state, throughout the country, throughout the world, really, that own small businesses, whatever their case may be. They don't know when they're going to get their next paycheck. They don't know if they're ever even going to reopen their businesses. Personally, I know a lot of people have been let go from their jobs. There's a lot of people that are scared. There's a lot of people are wondering, what am I going to do? So I want you to talk to them right now. You're a smart guy. You know what you're talking about here. Speak to those good people of Las Vegas right now, our listeners. What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I'm very empathetic for the situation. This is, as a professional economist, we look at these things, we're all kind of just, these are eyeball popping times. And one of the weird parts about this is there is a degree of universality about this, not because every single person is losing their job, but everyone is basically sort of self-quarantined right now. So the first thing is just sort of being really empathetic and hoping that in an ideal setting, as we can get this under control, there are certain parts of the economy that will stay strong. There are a few bright spots, like grocery is doing really, really well right now.
Exactly.
Alcohol, gun sales are up. So try to
marijuana.
Try to look for some silver linings in that respect.
Right.
But also, ideally, because at least the government is trying to be more proactive, there is at least some hope that there would be more help on the way, and that this hopefully will be short-lived enough that since we came out of an amazing economy and it's kind of come to a standstill, the best we all hope for is that we will, although I don't want to give false hope that it's going to skyrocket right back, back to normal the second things open up. Hopefully it'll be a much quicker recovery, and there will be a lot of demand when everybody in the world wants to get out of their houses now and go back and do all the things we used to do. So that's hopefully the best outlook I can put on it right now.
And for our listeners, you're basically saying that this isn't the 2008 housing crisis. This wasn't a fundamentally broken economy. This is just 15 different hurricanes hitting every single major city across the United States, basically. Let me ask you this. The numbers for the total deaths, they were 2.6 million under herd immunity, down to 240,000 with perfect mitigation down to 100. Now the number is 60,000. If 60,000 die of this virus, is what happened with the lockdown and the quarantine and how it's affected the economy, does it turn into an overreaction in your opinion?
I think it's hard to say, but I think this is really a situation where it is very difficult to know what the world would have looked like absent the lockdown. And so although 60,000 might be like, wow, that's, is that enough? It's hard to put a value on those lives, obviously. But I think the more important thing is we really don't know how well these predictions would have been otherwise. This is one place where I think we do need to be a little skeptical of, I don't know if 100 or 200,000 from those models is right or if that's actually an underestimate. So it's a difficult question. But right now, given the situation we're in, there are other potential consequences, including just the overwhelming of the healthcare systems. And I think you look to New York City as an example where not acting fast enough has definitely created a big problem. So this will play out, unfortunately, at different places across the country in different ways. But we're not going to really have insight, thankfully, into what the world would have looked like if we hadn't done this at all.
And by the way, it's also important to note that 60,000 model that they're saying is only by August. So they're not putting those expected deaths. I guess I hate to phrase it like that. It's by August. But hey, I want to thank you, John Johnson, economist and CEO of Edgeworth Analytics. Really, really great stuff. We really appreciate you and the expertise you have in speaking to our listeners. I know they appreciate it as well, John. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and good luck to all your listeners, of course.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, John.
Appreciate that. Really smart guy. John Johnson. We'll have him on again soon as this thing ends. Yeah.
You mentioned August, Brian, but the way that the virus stays in your system for, the most we've seen is 49 days. Usually it's 20 to 28, or it takes your life, or whatever the circumstances are. But that modeling is basically predicting 2 deaths per month after that.
Okay.
So
it's not. I haven't seen that figure.
They're predicting August is the absolute end of the actual outbreak.
So you're saying there is a figure out there, according to this model, that says there'll be 2 deaths after that?
Yeah, if you look at the actual modeling, the IHME modeling, the curve goes completely flat as of August 1st.
Okay, well, yeah, they're ending it at August 1st, but I don't think that necessarily means there's going to be no deaths after August 1st. I hope they're not.
There's not going to be a large amount of deaths. There might be a very minimal amount of deaths.
Again, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to make that assertion or opinion. I'm just saying that according to...
I'm not a doctor, but I can read graphs.
Okay, well, the graph ends in August. This is to August. I haven't heard one doctor say there's not going to be any cases after August. They just don't know at this point. I hope that's true. Obviously, I hope it's true. I hope there are no deaths tomorrow. But
what we really want to happen is we want the reinfection rate to be almost 0. That's what we really want.
You're going to have an opportunity to talk about this because it's your time to shine every day, as it always is, with JD's positive take of the day. That's coming up next, and also some very interesting statements from Meghan McCain. I'm not a very big fan of Meghan McCain for a lot of different reasons, but we certainly agree on one thing, and I'll tell you what that is coming up next, along with JD's Take of the Day. We'll be back in 60 seconds. You're listening to the Vegas Take right here on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDAWN.